Global Transformation Astrology, GTA, with William Stickevers.
If you didn't watch this is a must-watch interview on Twitter, on X, the Tucker Carlson show on Twitter. And more people are watching his show than they watch CNN, Fox News, than they read the New York Times, etc. So more people are watching and listening to Tucker Carlson now than anybody. So I think he's second only to Joe Rogan. And who's on the Joe Rogan show regularly? Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk. So Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson sat down for an extensive interview over the past few days where they covered a broad spectrum of topics ranging from political endorsements, disaster relief. But the most important thing that I want to discuss here is he said, quote, this is Elon Musk, if Trump loses, I really fear for what's going to be left of our democracy in America, suggesting that immigration policies have been manipulated to bolster Democratic votes based on his analysis. He hired a team of people. And he says, I see what they are doing. I understand it. We have the algorithm. We see the plan, right? He's being very clear that he has the technology that you and I do not have. And the deep state is undermining the fairness of the election. And Musk warned that if Trump doesn't win in November, it will be the genuine end of the democratic election system in the United States. And he argued that certain policies favor a demographic shift intended to secure a permanent democratic majority to maintain the plausible deniability of a democracy. And he said, if Trump doesn't win this election, it's the last election we're ever going to have. So, right? He says, if Trump loses, I'm Musk and Tucker Carlson sit down and must watch. So basically, like he says, if Trump loses, I'm fearing what's going to happen to me. Right? He says, how long do you think my prison sentence is going to be? And they sort of laughed. But, Tucker Carlson responded, if Kamala wins, how can they let X continue? And Elon Musk counters, well, they'll try to prosecute the company and then they'll try to prosecute me. So this is pretty serious, folks. When I keep telling you like, oh yeah, this is sort of like just another election. It is not another election. The reality of what is happening is a fascist deep state takeover of the nation will be sealed and complete. All right. Where's the astrology to back that? Well, that's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction 2026 informing what's happening in the 2024 election. Because if you look at the orb, it started. Look here. Whoa, it started. We're in 2024. Here's 2025. We're like right here. Look, we're in the wave function. This happens every 36 years. And we talked about Saturn-Neptune. We'll talk a lot more about it. But I just wanted to say, the Saturn-Neptune themes are playing out here. And definitely we see historical popular uprisings, revolutions, endings and beginnings, class conflicts, political strifes, globalization. And look at all the events that happened every 36 years. Hey, let's go back to the last 36 years. Fall of the Berlin Wall, collapse of the Soviet Empire. Go back to the last one, the Korean War and the Red Scare in the United States. Remember, for those of you old enough, 1917, Russian Revolution, rise of the Soviet Union. If you just go back, assassinations, war, assassination, Napoleonic Wars. What was the biggest war prior to World War I? The biggest war in the history of the world was the Napoleonic Wars. That's why you should watch the movie they just made about Napoleon. I hear sucks, but I think it's worth watching because it covers a lot of bases. I mean, hopefully somebody will make a better movie. But the point is that this all happens, right? 30 Years' War was one of the biggest wars, the Great Plague of London, all this stuff. So what I'm getting at here is that we're seeing this Saturn-Neptune shadow complex. Look at what's happened, debasing the monetary system so they can implement the CBDC. For those of you who work with me on the Regulus group and the crypto, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Where the debt became the asset and the dollar became the liability, so they could continue to debase the currency and to monetize the debt. And therefore, you're looking like you're making more money on your stock portfolio, but you're actually making less when you subtract the inflation, which is really 25%. Right. The real rate of inflation over 4 years has been 25%, but you think you're making more money. So if you're not making over 25% every year in the stock market, you're losing money. But most people don't want to believe that the rate of inflation is 25%. Now, you know who really doesn't want to believe the rate of inflation is 25%? People in the real estate industry. Trust me. So significant currency debasement. But here's the biggest thing. Here's a quote from George Orwell, who wrote the book 1984. A society becomes totalitarian when its structures becomes flagrantly artificial. That is when its ruling class, its elite class, its political elite class, has lost its function but succeeds in clinging to the power by force or fraud. Emphasis on fraud. What happened in August? Did we have somebody go through the democratic process based on the bylaws of the Democratic Party and the DNC to win the nomination? Right? Think about that. Fraud. So George Orwell's quote here is very Saturn-Neptune because Saturn rules government. It rules tradition, order, and all that stuff, authority, all those institutions. But what it means here is when authoritarianism, rigidity, control, by a political class that can never lose power because they're non-elected, non-state actors are basically running the show to maintain power, even when that authority is no longer legitimate or effective, meaning people get nominated who didn't go through a nomination process, right? This is where we see Orwell's ruling class clinging to power, even when it has lost its social function. And then when you add the Neptune in, which deals with what? Everyone goes, well, it's spiritual. Now, it's spiritual, but Neptune really rules what? Utopian vision, communism, socialism, spread the wealth, share it all, right? So Neptune manifests as deceptions and delusions and the shadow and the fabrication of realities to manipulate perception, apply perception management programs at the most sophisticated level by the state, by the intelligence community. And this corresponds to Orwell's notion of a structure becoming flagrantly artificial, suggesting a facade that obscures the true nature of societal government dysfunction. And that is what this election is going to become more and more about. The shadow complex of totalitarianism, where the collective good, the will of the good people become vehicles for manipulation and illusion through propaganda, applied perception management, deplatforming, censorship, and the suppression of dissent. Like, this is why Elon Musk says, if Trump doesn't win, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. We're all screwed. And so a totalitarian regime, a Saturn-Neptune totalitarian regime, Saturn needs order, which is enforced through fear, surveillance, the surveillance state, punishment coming through fines, through taxation, while Neptune, the shadow complex of Neptune, is invoked to manipulate public perception, creating an alternate reality that is projected in the media, but is not real in the real world, that gets you to be compliant to justify the regime's existence. So that is what we're seeing here. And that causes people to commit suicide because they have existential crisis, because they lose meaning. They start taking pills. They start taking drugs. They get hollowed out. The functional structure for the common good gets hollowed out by this totalitarian regime. It's totalitarian, but it still has the plausible deniability of a democracy. So it's the archetypal conflict between the shadow or Saturn's need for order and Neptune's undermining of that order through illusion. When I say the word illusion, I'm talking like a manipulated illusion, which can lead to a society that feels oppressed, meaningless, devoid of genuine purpose, a sick society, an overweight society, an overdrugged society, a society that does barely what it needs to do, quiet quitting society, etc. This is what they're trying to do to sustain this non-elected political class.
To watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com. Become a GTA member today.